It was the kind of humid, late spring evening where the air feels heavy with an impending storm. I was 19 years old and walking home from my part-time job at a small diner downtown. The day had dragged on, and I was exhausted. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in deep shades of orange and purple, I didn't notice the growing sense of unease that crept along with the shadows. The streets were quieter than usual, the kind of quiet that made you hyper-aware of your surroundings. My apartment wasn't far, maybe a 15-minute walk, but something about the stillness made the distance feel much longer that night. The only sound accompanying me was the rhythmic tap of my sneakers on the pavement. I turned down the usual short-cuda narrow, dimly lit alley that saved me a few minutes of walking. As I stepped into its shadows, a strange prickle ran down my spine like an unseen warning. Shaking it off, I quickened my pace. Halfway through, I noticed the faint hum of an engine. A glance over my shoulder revealed an older, nondescript gray sedan slowly creeping along behind me. My heart began to thud in my chest. I tried to calm myself. Maybe the driver was just lost. Maybe they weren't following me. But when I reached the end of the alley and turned onto the main street, the car turned too, maintaining its slow pace. The unease I had tried to dismiss blossomed into full-blown fear. A middle-aged man rolled down the passenger window as the car pulled up beside me. He had a friendly face, the kind of face you wouldn't think twice about in a crowd. "Hey, you need a ride?" he called out, his voice casual but insistent. "No thanks," I replied quickly, forcing a polite smile as I kept walking. My gut screamed at me to keep moving, to put distance between myself and that car, but he wasn't taking no for an answer. "Come on, it's late," he persisted, his voice taking on an edge I didn't like. "Let me help you out." When I ignored him again and kept walking, the car suddenly sped up and swerved to block my path. My heart leapt into my throat as the driver, a second man I hadn't noticed before, jumped out of the vehicle. He was younger than the passenger, stocky and strong-looking, with a hard expression that sent chills through me. "Just come with us," he said, his tone flat but menacing. Adrenaline surged through me. Without thinking, I bolted, my feet pounding against the pavement as I darted down the street. I heard their shouts and the slamming of car doors behind me, followed by the unmistakable sound of footsteps chasing me. Panic gripped me like a vice as I pushed my legs to move faster. I cut through another alley, this one darker and more foreboding than the last, hoping to lose them in the maze of backstreets. But they were relentless. The car's engine roared to life as they circled the block, trying to outmaneuver me. I could feel my lungs burning, my legs screaming in protest, but I didn't dare slow down. The sound of the car screeching to a halt behind me sent a fresh wave of terror coursing through my veins. I glanced back just in time to see the younger man lunging at me. His hand clamped over my mouth, muffling my scream, while the other wrestled me to the ground. My phone slipped from my pocket and skittered across the pavement, out of reach. I struggled, kicking and thrashing with everything I had, but he was too strong. He dragged me toward the car where the older man waited with a roll of duct tape. My mind raced, a torrent of fear and desperate thoughts. This is it, I thought. I'm never going to see my family again. They forced me into the trunk, slamming it shut before I could scream again. The darkness was suffocating, the air stale and hot. As the car sped off, I could feel every bump and turn, my body jostling against the metal walls. My mind was a whirlwind of terror and confusion. Who were these men? What did they want with me? Minutes felt like hours as the car raced through the city. I tried to stay calm, to think rationally, but the claustrophobia and fear were overwhelming. Then, suddenly, the car came to an abrupt stop. My heart raced as I heard voices outside, muffled but tense. "License and registration," a deep voice demanded. It was a police officer. Relief flooded through me, but it was quickly replaced by dread as I heard the younger man's voice, sharp and angry. "What's the problem, officer?" he said, trying to sound calm but failing. "We've had reports of suspicious activity," the officer replied. "Pop the trunk." My heart pounded as I heard the trunk latch release. Light flooded the small space, blinding me for a moment. The officer's shocked face came into view, followed by a flurry of movement as he shouted for backup. The men panicked, shouting curses as one of them pulled a gun. Gunshots rang out, deafening, in the confined space. I screamed, curling into a ball as chaos erupted around me. When the noise finally subsided, I heard the officer's voice again, calm but firm. "You're safe now," he said, helping me out of the trunk. I was shaking, my body trembling uncontrollably as the reality of what had just happened sank in. The officer's partner called for an ambulance, and I was rushed to the hospital, my injuries minor, but my mind reeling. The next few days were a blur of police reports and media coverage. The men who had taken me were career criminals, wanted for a string of kidnappings and robberies. The officer who saved me, however, didn't survive the encounter. His sacrifice weighed heavily on me, a sobering reminder of how close I had come to a far worse fate. Even now, years later, I can still feel the cold metal of the trunk against my back, the suffocating darkness, and the sheer terror of that night. I've learned to be more cautious, to trust my instincts, and to never take my safety for granted. But no matter how much time passes, I'll never forget the bravery of the officer who gave his life to save mine. His heroism is the only reason I'm here to tell this story.